We have now used the default route, but as mentioned, we may end up having to write the route templates ourselves. In order to avoid having to write a lot of templates, there are some options available to configure the routes. Let's take a look at these. And let's start with route defaults. You can see I have now defined values for the controller and the action segments. These are so-called route defaults. For the controller, this is set to home, and for the action, it is set to index. So when a request comes in that doesn't specify a value for the controller or the action part, these defaults will be used. This will allow us to send a request to the root of the site, and automatically the index action on the home controller will get executed. It's of course possible to also pass, for example, a third segment, which we in fact already saw earlier. Say that we need to pass a value, such as the selected pie in the list, so that the detail page knows which details need to be shown. The pattern that you see here, where the ID parameter is added, will allow us to do exactly that. Know that you can add as many segments as needed. In the snippet here, the third segment now has a noticeable character, the question mark. By adding this value, the segment now becomes optional. It is not required to be part of the request for this pattern to still be a match. Because we added this route can now be used for both requests that include the ID segment as well as routes that do not. The two URLs that you can see here on the slide will match the route. One has the ID segment and one doesn't. But since this segment was defined as optional, we'll have a match for this route with both requests. It is also possible to check the actual content of the segment. We can put in constraints to restrict just any value, turning the URL into a match. You can see an example of that in this slide here. Notice for the last segment, I've now added :int. The constraint part is actually the int part, so the part after the colon. With this constraint now in action, there will not be a match if the last segment isn't an integer value or can't be passed into one. I've also left a question mark in there, meaning that the last segment is in fact still optional, so there will still be a match if we leave it out entirely.